Hey, good morning, everybody. This morning we're honored to be joined by Brigadier General Rob Parker. He's the Deputy Director for the Joint Staff J6 and previously the G6 for USAREUR and Commander of 5th Signal Command, both in Germany, as well as previously the 59th Signal Battalion Commander in Alaska, S6 for 2nd Battalion, 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment. Sir, this morning we have all the Battalion S6 course students, which ranges from staff sergeant through captain, some of whom are currently sitting Battalion S6s within 7th ID or 593rd ESC, and some other tenant units on JBLM, and some of whom are nuggeting out in 51st Signal Battalion, but may have the opportunity to be a Battalion S6 someday. And then you're also joined by a whole slew of other signalers here on JBLM, ready to hear some guidance from you, sir. And with that, I'll hand it over to you.
Hey, just wanted to make sure you still got my audio. We good, Major Barrett?
Yes, sir, loud and clear.
All right, thanks. Hey, first, for both you and Ronnie, thanks so much for inviting me to speak with the group today. It's an honor for me, and I appreciate the opportunity to break away from some of the normal grind here in the Pentagon to really speak with y'all, and hopefully it's not just one way. We'll certainly save time at the end so that I can field some of your questions, or maybe we can have a good dialogue on some aspects of this. And I tell you, comments today are really directed toward the S6 primary audience, but I know we have others in, so hopefully you'll find something that's useful and beneficial to you as we talk through this, because certainly it's a team sport. When we get after communications, all aspects of this, as we'll talk through today, it's not about any one organization, any one person. It really does take the full team to bring about the network, a network that really enables commanders to do their business. So if you're looking at the cover slide here, got a picture of a cast of characters from World War I, doing their best to do their signal business there. And so for some of you going out to your S6 jobs, that may essentially still be the size of your team. You may have fewer individuals in that, you may have a few more. And while your equipment hopefully will not be as antiquated as what's in the picture there, in some cases, you're not going to have the latest and greatest. Anybody that tracks a network CFT or maybe 182 out at Fort Bragg or some of our other units that the Army has prioritized for receiving some of this, really the latest and greatest equipment that we're trying to test, experiment with, and figure out, is this the right equipment for the future? You may not always have that. You may have something a little older than that. And your challenge and your team's challenge is going to be making the most of what you have today, understanding how it operates, training your team and others on the employment of that equipment, and really bringing out the best in your team to enable the mission for your commander. And so while we've seen technology change over the years, the character of war has changed somewhat over the years. What really remains essential is having signal officers who understand their trade craft and are also technical leaders. And that's my intent today, is really talk through your challenge of trying to find that right balance between being technical savvy, understanding the mission, understanding signal flow, but also being able to communicate not only internally and down to your own team, laterally to other staff members, but also externally as we look at some of the other teammates we're going to talk about today. And then ultimately being able to articulate to your commander what their capabilities are, when and where they can use them, and how best you can bring them about to execute the commander's intent. So with that, we'll jump over to the first slide here. So we're G6 S6 responsibilities. I know today's course really focused predominantly at the S6 level, but as I highlighted, these are a few things I sort of thought about, went out and grabbed a few definitions that were out there online, tweaked them a little to what I thought was important. And I'm just going to very briefly touch on these. I really want to spend the remainder of my time today with you on some of the other slides and discussions. But essentially, I mean, you should know by this point, as you step up to become an S6, you are responsible for all the communications and systems in that unit. And I say systems with a little bit of hesitation because there are certain mission command systems that will fall under the S2 or S3's roles and responsibilities. But we're going to talk a little bit today about how you help ensure that they're successful in what they're trying to do. But the bottom line is, what you and your team does to enable communications for your unit is essential to enabling mission success. Simply put, without communications, a commander cannot command. And so, I think we've all heard the saying, if you've got your unit out without communications, you're really just camping. And so to get after what the commander not only envisions, but as part of the essential larger roles and responsibilities as aligned under, in some cases, joint forces, others, and either all domain or maybe something less, maybe a multi-domain operation, which we'll touch on here briefly. You've got to have a good grasp on that. You're going to be engaging at multiple levels of command. Some of it's with your peers, fellow lieutenants, captains, maybe some majors. The next conversation you may have may be with a battalion or brigade commander, or it may be with one of your multinational partners or somebody from joint or interagency that's trying to work in with you and your organization, depending on where you're located. What I'm leading into, and we get into these following slides, which is really old school Army, be, know, do. You represent the Signal Regiment for good or for bad. And I'm going to try to help you today think of some ways, many of which you've probably already given some thought to or have been exposed to. Hopefully I'll give you a few extra bits to put in your kit bag that you can take with you, because my goal was to ensure you are ultimately successful. So if we can go to the next slide, please. So as I sit back and think about the things that a 6 must be, it looks like a pretty basic slide, but at its depth, everything listed here is really going to impact you for the better or the worse. And this gets back that competent and confident. Many of you are going to find yourselves in units that you may not be that comfortable with. You're going to have to study and learn the mission. You're going to have to learn some of the unique equipment, both their warfighting equipment, but also their communications equipment. And you're going to have to build a sense of understanding of that and be able to confidently engage with both your team and the other teammates and stakeholders that are out there. And so, getting to that point for most of us is not something that we hit the ground on day one with, unless we've had some prior exposure to that, served in a similar type unit. So for me, as a captain showing up in the 160th Special Ops Aviation Regiment, there was a lot of very soft, unique equipment. There was also a lot of avionics-focused radio equipment that I simply had not been exposed to. And so as an officer coming into that type of environment, I found it on myself to have to seek out subject matter experts, those NCOs and or warrant officers that were already a part of my S6 team or part of the regimental team, to spend time with them to really sit down and have hands-on, go over the equipment, understand how it's used, spend some time in the S3 shop or with fellow peers in their respective companies to understand how that equipment was employed, and to get some history about it. So it takes some self-study. You're not going to get everything you need for success from a course at the signal school. You're not going to get it all in a S6 course. You're going to get a lot of things that help you, but it's really building your competency, building your self-confidence so that you can engage. And that really is underscored by your commitment. When you think about how you and your team operate within a given unit, when I go in, whether it's to an S6 job, a G6 job, or even the CJ6 for all of Operation Inherent Resolve, I talk to my team about being relevant. And I think all of you've probably served in units or locations where it's pretty quick to see both which team members have established themselves as being relevant, and importantly, the staff section. So whether it's at G6, at S6, some other entity, when you find those from outside that organization, the commander, the staff, the S3, the S2, the XO, bypassing those entities because they're either fed up with it, they feel like they're not competent, they've gotten a lot of attitude every time they've gone to ask for assistance or help, then that organization has ceased to be relevant. And so that's always, at the forefront of my mind as a leader in those type organizations, is understanding how and where your S6 shop can be relevant, helping articulate that to your NCOs, your soldiers, and in some cases, civilians that may be on your team as contractors or DA civilians, so that you can establish clear engagement plans, your personal intent for how you're going to ensure that your shop is relevant. Part of that's underscored really by your personal character and how you set things from the get-go. And for me, I've found that being trustworthy is probably the greatest enabler of both. Really gives you freedom of maneuver, so to speak, and also enables mission command. And so how are you trustworthy? You're trustworthy in the ways you communicate, not only with your team, but also with your commander, with that XO, with that S3, so that you are clearly articulating to them what's possible, what's not possible, and where you don't know the answer to something. Because, when you think about the wide range of systems, transport, various connectivity conditions that you're going to employ your communications equipment, you simply will not know everything. And so at those specific times, it can't be all the time, it's all right to tell them, hey, not exactly sure on this, I've got an idea, but let me go check with some of my subject matter experts before I give you an answer on this. And then, in a time-sensitive manner, make sure you actually follow up with them to provide that either advice or the capability. Building that level of trust, particularly with the commanders and those key leaders in the organization, will allow you the time and space to do what you need to do when they're not around or when they're right over your shoulder. And so how do you get to that point? A lot of signalers of various ranks, I've seen it in lieutenants, I've seen it in colonels, I've seen it in other general officers, have a difficult time under pressure articulating extremely technical and complex problem sets to those other leaders and soldiers who maybe do not have a background in a technical field, or you're simply not inclined to really worry about those type of things. And you quickly lose relevance when somebody asks you about a problem, a challenge, or how to execute a mission, and you spill out a whole phrase full of acronyms. Hey, sir, we got to work on the IPs with the NEC because, those aren't getting through and they're getting caught up in the IDS and this. it's just for some of those guys, it caused their head to explode. The best thing to do is to learn your commander, learn those key staff members, what level of expertise they have. Some of them are closet IT folks. They really enjoy that discussion, want to have it. Some of them may take you places you really don't want or need to go at that time, while others have no personal desire to learn or know about it. And I think we see fewer and fewer of those in the Army today because most of our senior leaders and leaders in trusted positions understand the importance of the network, understand the importance of communications to enabling them to execute their mission. So this gets back to sort of the art of how you engage as an S6 or a G6, or even when you're out of those jobs, as a communicator in our regiment, being able to simplify, help people understand without talking down to them, give them enough that they understand you're working the issue, you understand the problem, and that you're going to take care of it, and you come back and articulate that to them. The final two bullets on here, physical fitness, and I'll really talk at the end. I'm a fan of what the Army would call the performance triad, finding that right balance between activity, exercise, your nutrition, and then your sleep. And really, none of us ever perfects that, but getting a good balance of that certainly helps you. And many of the units that you're going to find yourself in as a S6, whether right, wrong, indifferent, or otherwise, your ability not only to engage side by side with the warfighters that you're supporting in terms of physical fitness, conditioning, understanding, and being able to execute same similar soldier tasks that they are expected to execute gives you credibility. And it goes back up to helping to build what we talked about at the top, build your personal confidence, help you to be seen not only as somebody who's technically competent, but also has those critical warfighting soldier skills to be able to endure long hours, tough environments, challenging mission sets, often under duress due to things that are simply outside of your control. And then the bottom bullet there is really all about remaining engaged. And this sort of the physical representation of what I alluded to with being relevant and trustworthy. You will have to work very hard not to get trapped in the back room of a TOC, in your office, or in some other location where you are so consumed with trying to solve technical issues, discuss with other teammates technical challenges and issues and planning, that you fail to get out on the top floor, that you fail to engage and be prepared for battle rhythm events and meetings. If you're going to key staff meetings and events, whether they're in garrison or they're in an operational warfighting environment, and you're just sitting there and responding to either critique or questions, and you don't come prepared to lay out and discuss some key and relevant things that are for the appropriate group that's represented there, then you're not doing what you need to do. And so, again, there are absolutely times that you need to rely on your technical skill set, knowledge, experience, or that of others to bring together a group to solve some really hard problems. But you also have to get out there and be engaged internally and externally. And it's something that just doesn't happen. It has to be intentional. It may be something as basic as keeping time on your watch or the clock so that you know, hey, at least once an hour, I'm going out, I'm walking the TOC floor, I'm walking the field side, I'm walking fill in the blank. I am picking up a phone, I am sending a text, I am communicating with other key members out there so they not only know that I'm involved and have a sincere interest in the execution of the mission, but it also provides an opportunity for you to become aware of issues and concerns before they truly blow up in your face. So let's go to the next slide for no. These are a few things, comments that I pulled together. Some of this I've already alluded to. And, as I said, you and your personal challenge will be finding that right balance that is situational dependent on whether you are a technical expert at the time, whether you are a technical leader, or you're just an Army leader executing a mission. And you've got to be able to weight those depending on the situation, where you are, what's going on. How do you figure that out as a leader? Well, you have to make sure you understand your unit's mission, figure out where that fits in the bigger picture, and your commander's priorities. By doing that, you and your team behind you that really understands the communications capabilities that are either organic or non-organic to your unit, you can either, one, make sure you're utilizing what you've got to the best ability possible, and or you're reaching out in that planning phase, coordinating phase, to ensure that your unit either has direct or indirect support of those communications capabilities that are going to be essential to mission success. So how do you do that? For me, I think just like all Army leaders, it's important that you know yourself. We all have a wide variety of strengths and weaknesses. If you're able to do an honest assessment, if you've gotten feedback through some other mechanisms, whether peer ratings, peer groups, maybe some of your previous commanders or mentors have helped you to see yourself, then you need to make sure that you are using your strengths and getting them complemented by those on your team, whether it's your NCOs, your warrant officers, soldiers, and then bringing that together as a collective. Everybody on that team's an individual that has to operate as a single team for you to bring about success to the mission. Your ability to understand and see, regardless of rank, who the right person is to execute a task or mission, how to bring them together, or maybe bring together disparate organizations and other soldiers, civilians to execute the task on hand. It's really going to be what helps you and your commander ultimately to be successful. And so the next to last bullet there talks about who are some people that can help you be successful and how can you help them equally be successful. So I talked about this caution of allowing yourself to be isolated as a six, whether you're down in a team room, you're down in office, you're in the back tent of a TOC, you're sitting somewhere else on the field site. You should personally have a very good relationship with the 3 and the 2 amongst other staff members. I think you'll find that the 2 has similar perspective as you do, just because of a lot of the systems that they work with and control. Plus, they have a lot of good information that can help you plan good signal support to operations. The 3, though, in my opinion, should always, even though you're a primary staff officer as a 6, you should always view the 3 as the greater among equals. And so I've always engendered myself to go meet with the 3 on a regular basis, their representatives, hey, I'm here to help. I'm here to enable the mission. I want to understand it. What are you trying to do? How can we best execute your mission set? And I think that by building good relations with the 3 and 2, as well as the EXO and executive officer for the unit, you help build your credibility, the credibility of your S6 team, which is really essential. I mean, it's no secret that as a 6, you're going to take some face shots sometimes. Sometimes they're deserved, and sometimes it's things totally out of your control. Throughout the Army over the past few years, we've seen 6s who've been incredibly successful, and we've seen those who have not been so successful. While certainly different situations can lead to one outcome or another, I think all 6s can help themselves by really building those solid relationships back to showing your relevancy and your forward-leaning, outlook on trying to get the mission accomplished. And what you will find is you build advocacy with those other staff members. So let's say either the commander's having a bad day, the commander doesn't know exactly everything you've been doing. When you're not there, it's been my experience that XO, that 3, that 2 others speak on your behalf. Yeah. Hey, sir, hey, look, got it. Parker and his team, they've already contacted us. Rob gave me a quick brief. They're working this. They're coming back to us in 5 minutes. They're coming back to us in 10 minutes. It will give you some space that we're going to talk about in just a minute, not only for yourself, but importantly for your team members. And it also helps because we're all going to have bad days out there as signal leaders. It happens. You don't want that to become the default. Again, building that reputation for the right reasons gives you the credibility you need, the freedom of maneuver to do what you need to do within your authorities, either on the network, with systems, or in conjunction with other partners. And then you're going back and briefing the 3 XO commander on the actions you took, what the outcome is, and how it's going to ensure that they can execute their mission. That's what we're going to talk about in just a minute. Operational dependencies is really, really a wide topic. I could have listed off a lot of things there. That goes into everything from being a part of developing the site power plan, so you understand where your power is coming from, your alternate abilities to execute. Do you have enough radios working through, or excuse me, batteries for your radios, working through the logistics aspects? What other units are you relying on? Is a ESB supporting you? Are you tied into a NEC? Are you tied into some other type of communication support? It's a concentric circle that you've got to think about. And sometimes it just helps to literally draw it out on a piece of paper and think about your internal dependencies, think about your external dependencies, both in terms of specific capabilities plus organizations. And then when you think about those organizations, who is it you personally can introduce yourself to via email, via phone call, via in-person, preferably prior to executing that training event or exercise or actual deployment. Next slide, please. So we talked about, in my opinion, some of the things that you need to be. We've talked about some of the things you need to know. And then really, I'm going to get into a few more of the specifics here. I've alluded to some of them. The things you need to do. The first bullet, said another way, is helping others help themselves. We talked a little bit about other mission command systems that are out there. There's a picture of a TOC sort of depicted down toward the right there. There are a lot of systems that either inexperienced staff or staff that just doesn't know better turn to you and expect you and your team to operate for them. Many of these mission command systems are their responsibility to operate. You're just providing the connectivity and path for them. But instead of giving them the Heisman, giving them, hey, talk to the hand, I've found it best to help train and enable them to do what they need to do. So how do you do that? You have that open conversation with S3, with the other key staff members at the principal level, at their senior NCO level, whether that's a sergeant first class, a master sergeant, a sergeant major. Have those communications so that they understand what their responsibility is, how your team enables them to do that, and then help develop the execution checklist for the COMEX. The COMEX really should be the S3's responsibility. A lot of times you'll see it try to get dumped on the 6. Hey, have you checked everything? Do you know everything? Having that good relationship enables you to remind the 3, that's clearly within their lane. You and your team want to be a part of helping them do that, but you get through that execution checklist, detailed checklist. So I think most of you are probably familiar with it, but if you're not, that could be something as simple as, hey, we're going to validate NIPR connectivity. Can you get to the unit web page? Can you get to the file share? Can you get to fill in the blank? Can you send a text? Check, check, check. Each person who's sitting out there on that top floor should be able to execute those tasks, and there should be a tracking to validate not only they're trained on it, but they've been able to do that. There's certainly courses that are out there on many installations, like digital master gunner courses, that those staff representatives need to go to, but in some cases, members of your own team need to go to those as well, just so they have familiarization with those systems. Communications PACE plan by phase. You can't just have one PACE plan in most cases. I mean, primary, alternate, contingency, emergency communications. For one exercise or operation, you'll find that different aspects of the phased employment, your PACE plan's going to need to change. You work that out in conjunction again with other staff members in the 3, and preferably it gets documented in an op order or a frago so that everybody, regardless of their position in the organization, understands what that PACE plan is. And again, that links back to you as a trusted advisor for the commander, for the ops officer, for the XO, knowing the unit's mission, understanding what needs to happen by phase, and how you can best employ the systems and capabilities you have, or requesting others to come in to make sure that can happen. During that COMEX, it's important to validate the PACE plan. A lot of units move ahead, they assume away some aspects of the PACE plan, and then when Murphy comes in and things happen that they always do, the plan falls apart. And in the AER, you come back and say, or the hot wash, hey, we had this plan, should have done this. And then you waste a lot of time and effort, when if it had been published, trained on, then everybody knows what to execute at what phase of the operation. I'm going to jump down to the keep the boss and staff informed. I've already alluded to this a few times, but it's really this see and be seen. And some of this is just the psychology of how humans interact. You could be the greatest S6 ever, sitting behind the scenes, putting flawless communications out there. But if nobody ever sees you, if you're not engaged, or when the crisis does happen, if you allow yourself to get so caught up that you are not out there either virtually or physically in the TOC, in the other areas of operation, keeping the staff informed, talking to the 3, the commander, the XO, whoever it is that has responsibility for that phase of the operation, then you really go back to leading to that perception of either being irrelevant, out of touch, or more than that. You don't want that. What I believe, and I sort of got my bullets out of order here, so I apologize. So when that crisis happens, your role as a leader is assessing the situation, giving clear direction to your team, and then helping give them some standoff space. And that's a balance, right? So there's certain tasks and things that happen that your team's going to need to be out and about on the floor of the TOC, maybe behind the scenes. And it's very easy for them to get overwhelmed with, we'll say, somebody from the 3 shop, hanging over their shoulders, giving them other directions, giving them maybe a commander, putting pressure on them, engaging them direct. You need to assess the situation and figure out how to, in many cases, allow them to be a member of that other team and operate immersed in it, but at the same time recognize those times and situations where whether it's that warrant, that NCO, that soldier who's trying to clear up some lines of code, get something reconfigured, restart a piece of equipment, they need some breathing room, and you've got to find the ways to do that. And so for me, it's getting out there, staying involved, keeping the staff updated, and letting them know that your folks are on the job. And when you say, hey, I'll follow up with you, you follow up with them so that they know, and you close the loop and you move on to the next event. I will tell you, there were times as the CJ6 for CJTF, for all of Kuwait, Iraq, Syria, that we had communications outages going on. They were pretty substantial. When I was out there talking to the 3 or other staff members, I was picking up the phone, doing some test calls and stuff as well. Somebody seeing me visibly doing something helped them know that I was engaged. Was picking up the phone and calling a team member to do a line check, was it helpful? In the big picture, probably not. And I was really communicating and working on other issues, but it also provided a visual that me and my team were out on the floor actively engaged, because some of those things simply are outside your scope of ability to immediately influence. Doesn't mean you aren't trying, you're not getting after it, you're not working with all the right staffs and organizations, supporting agencies, but sometimes that's a very tough place to be in. I highlight the comment below that with being a good partner. Going on almost 28 years in the Army, one consistent thing that I've seen that's not helpful to our regiment is some of the tribalism that tends to happen between our S6, G6 community and what we would call our NECCOM community. There's a tendency at times, either subtly or very overtly, to talk down, to posture oneself as somehow being a better or more technically savvy, operationally grounded signal officer than that person on the other end of the link or in that other organization. Now, I would say that does not discount for the fact that everybody who comes up in different environments, if they haven't had the opportunity to move freely back and forth between NEC, strategic, operational assignments to tactical assignments, there's certainly a gap of knowledge, a gap of understanding, a gap of ability to put oneself in the other's position. But when our signal regiment really functions best, when we all execute the mission to the best of our abilities, is when we have a good teaming effort. And how do you get to that good teaming effort? It's prior to that deployment, prior to that training event, prior to that crisis striking. You've built those relationships with some of the NEC team, whether that's civilians, whether that's military leadership there, soldiers working in the NEC. Maybe you've made an intentional effort to get some of your soldiers, NCOs, or warrants the opportunity to either, at a minimum, go over a minimum and meet, greet, and do a tour of the NEC facility or a regional hub node that's going to be supporting you during a certain event. If time permits, if the commanders have policies in place that allow you to rotate individuals over to go do a term of training and service over there for a few weeks, a few months, it's in your best interest, even if you can't fulfill it for the whole time, to get them over there to build those relationships. Enabling your warrant officers and NCOs. I've talked about having trust that's mutual trust. That means that you build good relationships with your NCOs. You understand their strengths and weaknesses. You help them to train and improve on where their weaknesses are, but you give them clear and articulated guidance on where you expect them to engage, what you want them doing to help ensure you have a trained team, how you want them interacting with others on the staff, and ultimately how they help them understand where they fit as being a part of your S6 team and help them to get that right balance of technical capabilities with developing their leadership. For me, in my experience with the network, more often than not, I've had to lean very heavily on warrant officers who I think have carried the day through numerous operations because of their extensive experience. Many who started as soldiers and NCOs gained that experience and then became much more technical and are really the ones that behind the scenes or in front of the scenes not only are technical executors of some of these very complex tasks, but they're also essential to continuing to train other NCOs and our soldiers, and importantly, our officers, regardless of rank. My request to you is when you're in those situations, as quickly and rapidly as possible, assess strengths and weaknesses, figure out how to employ your personnel within their current capabilities, and then help develop a plan so that they can become more well-rounded and build out their areas that are perceived as either weak or need some improvement on there. Next slide, please. So a lot of what I talked about today, and I want to save time to answer your questions or listen to any comments others may have, maybe a different perspective than what I've laid out. I'm certainly welcome to that. For me, relationships matter, and you will hear that throughout your career. If you don't build sincere and meaningful relationships, not only with your peers, but within those throughout the signal community and warfighting community, that's really how you get things to happen more often than not. There may be specific missions you're fighting for. Hey, but we're the priority unit during this portion of the fight, and that information may not have gotten over to a NEC or a regional hub node, or they may have competing priorities. Having that relationship because you already know somebody and you've built that and invested in it can help you to accomplish your portion of the mission, ultimately for the good of the Army and the joint team. Secondly, words matter. They matter when you're choosing how you communicate to your boss or other senior staff, as I talked about, finding that right balance between operationally grounded, doctrinally relevant terminology versus balancing with some technical discussion there at the right level based on that individual, their position, but it also matters in the way you engage with your team. And for that, I think it takes you being able to absorb a great deal of pressure that's going to be on you from your commander, from other leaders, or maybe even self-imposed pressure, a pressure that you feel like you've got to be performing at a certain level, that you're falling short, that you don't know something, that you don't fully comprehend maybe what's going on in that situation, to be able to internalize that in the right ways, not an unhealthy way, and keep from turning around and blasting that down on your soldiers, your NCOs, your warrant officers, others that are trying their best to execute a mission. There's certainly the right time to clamp down, to have very direct conversations, but I would encourage you to the utmost of your ability to learn to manage your emotions, to try to be steady wheel as you move through some of these situations. Folks who flip to operational extremes, either those who totally lose it and go ballistic on folks, to those who go and cower in the corner or head back to their tent and not seen. Neither one of those are helpful. So keeping yourself closer to that balanced medium, I think, is an important place to be. So with that, I thank each of you for your service. I appreciate what you and your families are doing. Immensely challenging times, but a great time for our Army. There's a lot of new technology coming out. I've spent the last 2 years in the Pentagon. I worked as a hardware division chief in G8 for Mission Command Systems, working closely with the 3, the 6, the Network CFT, Army Futures Command, really helped to bring some of these new technologies to bear. So it's a pretty exciting time. I'm going to pause there and I'll turn it over to the team there to lead us through any further discussions or questions you may have.
Sir, thanks so much. So for everyone that's on the line here, if you could raise your hand and be prepared to ask your question. Lead things off with your name, your organization, and your question. And Harry Panati, kick things off.
Sir, this is Captain Panati from 423 Infantry 22 BCT. So, sir, one thing you talk about is relationships. And so as a platoon leader, my fellow platoon leaders were right next to me in the same building. If I needed something, I'd just walk 2 feet over to them. Whereas now as an S6 in an infantry battalion, my nearest peers are in other buildings. They're all doing other missions. They're not the same type of unit. So how do you, as someone who's been in a lot of different units, or how do you kind of manage that or develop those relationships along the way?
Yeah, so great question. Not an easy answer there, but I think there are a lot of different forms and abilities for you to sort of nurture those relationships and build on them from. I'm not sure, having not been assigned at JBLM or out at that location right now, if y'all have some type of signal get together, orange call.
Not that I'm aware, sir. I typically only see the other S6s when we do the brigade sync. Then COVID's also kind of interrupted that flow, sir.
Hey, team, just pause for a second. Looks like General Parker was bumped off. I'm going to try and bring him back in. Yeah, sir, this is Major Barrett. Looks like you dropped off for a second there, but Harry, go ahead and
all right.
continue.
So I got his question. I'm not sure if you can hear me right now.
Yes, sir, loud and clear.
Okay. So like I was saying, I think fortunately there are a lot of different forms that you have available to you now. I'm not sure if y'all have any kind of orange call or monthly kind of get together on the installation like that. That's certainly one venue. There are a lot of virtual venues out there that you can use to connect on, whether it's some of the S6, G6 kind of forums, or even something like LinkedIn allows you to start establishing those relationships. I think, and of course, easier said than done, but back to that being intentional, today, after this, tonight, tomorrow, whatever, sit down and draw a circle and put you and your S6 organization right there in the middle and draw some lines out from that for who and where you think you need to establish either relationships and or influence for day-to-day operations, garrison operations, deployment operations. You figure that out and sort of draw lines over to that, like I said, NEC, to some of your peers and other key organizations that you're going to be interacting with, and then develop your plan, cold call them. Hey, I'm over here. I know we don't get time to chat. Can you think I can come over to your office and have lunch, one day, or can we link up over here? Do you mind doing a Teams meeting with me for a few minutes? I just want to, try to build a relationship here. That would be my suggestion. I think virtually there are a lot of ways to do it. In person, when available, is usually the best way.
Okay, thanks, sir. Kevin, go ahead.
Morning, sir. This is Lieutenant Rutherford. I'm with the 593rd ESC, Sitting Battalion S6. As a new second lieutenant, I'm kind of like getting involved in some of the things, but I'm more curious into what is some of the new hardware or software or doctrinal changes that we're going to have to kind of address our digital footprint or electronic signatures when we fight near peer.
Okay, so good question. If you go out there and look and you go to various forums or things like some of the USA speeches, some of our various signal leaders or joint leaders give, you'll get a wide variety of answers. When I think about it at its very essence right now, I think meshed radio connectivity is probably one of the key areas as we look into our IP-based radios and being able to utilize a mesh capability that, even though collectively may have a large signature, it becomes very hard to locate specific individuals or units within there. It also provides you some of that survivability and redundancy that you want, particularly when you lose line of sight connectivity. I think that's extremely helpful, and I really didn't get into it on the discussion. But I mean, forget about enemy effects. When we talk about operating in a degraded, denied environment, intermittent, limited connectivity, there are a lot of challenges. Just talking pure geography. What I've seen a lot, having served both in deployments in the desert, Southwest United States, working out in Arizona, in Europe, we have a lot of units that may go to NTC and train and feel really good about their connectivity prior to heading over on a rotational assignment to Europe. And then they show up and their commanders have them out there, rightfully so. They're out in wooded, hilly terrain. They want to set up the TOC down in a low place. But the sixes either fail to articulate and or they are not clearly heard in terms of advice of not employing in those types of operations. So this goes back to being a subject matter expert, understanding how your systems operate, particularly when we're talking line of sight equipment. Make sure you are thinking through and advising your command. A little bit of a side comment there. What else are we doing? Low Earth orbit satellites, I think, are going to be a significant change to our abilities to operate globally. If you've followed SpaceX at all, you can watch and see. I mean, they're launching, hundreds to thousands of these low Earth orbit satellites. The Department of Defense, the Army, others are investing in either some of the same commercial capabilities or some DoD owned assets that will give us not only better connectivity through the space environment, but also allow things like better ISR type capabilities as well. And so as you're watching what's coming, it's the meshed radios, it's the LEO, some MEO, but predominantly looking at LEO. And then at some point, we're gradually getting into incorporating more artificial intelligence, machine learning into our platforms to what I would say automate your pace plan. I mean, I think for a while, particularly, you're still going to have to figure out your pace plan, but that ability for a radio or system to understand, assess the impact of either direct or indirect jamming, degradation by other means, and switch to a different frequency or a total different type of transmission transport to ensure the availability of the mission. I think those are probably the top three things I would think of.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate your advice on
that. Captain Chi, go ahead.
Good morning, sir. The Squadron S6 for 114 Cavalry for Ghost Brigade. Biggest question I had was, what's your advice, or what would be your advice on enabling the staff and enabling the rest of the squadron on how to care about their equipment? I think within the brigade in the 4 years that I've been here, that's one thing I've always seen as a roadblock with taking care of the comms equipment and making comms relevant. And it's still just, no matter how much that I try to convey that to either my XOs or the commanders, down at the basic soldier level 10 tasks, things just continue to get broken because there's a lack of care for their equipment. So any advice is greatly appreciated, sir.
Yeah, so that's a difficult problem. I think the Army's probably dealt with that since its inception. Soldier care and maintenance of equipment. How does that get changed? It gets changed through leadership. You've already alluded to some of the leaders that you've engaged with to try to influence that. I think if you've been there a while and your engagements to date have not turned into changes that you need and expect to happen out there, then I think you have to find a way to elevate that. Look at the regiment XO, at the appropriate level, the executive officer there who's really responsible for all the logistics and maintenance within the organization, and maybe have an office call and talk to them. Don't just say, hey, here's the problem. Okay. Give some suggestions. I do think that it has to be executed in conjunction with the three, because the three's got to buy into ultimately, hey, this isn't just about doing PMCS. This isn't just about fill in the blank. This is really about ensuring you have the operational capability you need at the time of employment, wherever that is, to execute the mission. So I think it's you having to get some buy-in from some more senior leadership if the level you've been engaging in just hadn't had the desired impact. And then that can become what you would hopefully see is maybe a monthly maintenance focus day or quarterly focus day, or some people use the term stand down. That's not always widely accepted, but giving a very intentional focus that's underscored by the three, the XO, that, hey, this is what we're going to do. This is why it's important. And here's how we're going to follow up to ensure that your organization at the appropriate level is executing those tasks. And oh, by the way, Lieutenant Chi and his team are here to help you, but they're not going to do it all for you. This is user-owned responsibility, right? Okay.
Sergeant First Class Trujillo.
How you doing, sir? This is Sergeant First Class Trujillo from the 51st ESB. My question is not more of signal, but more geared to like a different topic. So do you think there would be more diversity as far as like in gender in different units as far as like infantry units? Because of speaking for myself, being in signal, a senior NCO as a female, I feel like I have to prove myself more than the average male, and to get my point across to I would say my counterparts or the battalion commander to actually listen to me when I know what I'm talking about, and I said the exact same thing as the next person.
Yeah, so I think that's a great question. Right up front, I don't have a specific answer for you. I think it's more of an acknowledgement that our Army's taking intentional steps and efforts to get all members to really look and listen and value all our teammates for both, essentially being who they are, but also for their technical and operational expertise. I think that even though we're seeing changes and really opening up a wide variety of career fields to our female NCOs and officers, I think there's probably still a culture that's going to continue to take some time to work through there. But from what I've seen, I've been very encouraged. And so if I was going to use an example, I would say if we look at our special operations community, that, you know, probably stereotypically, without actually looking at numbers and, you know, somebody would think, you know, triple alpha male personality. For years, we've had very successful female officers and NCOs within those various special mission units. And I'm confident if they can succeed and be viewed as absolutely relevant subject matter experts in a variety of areas and valued team members, if it can happen in that environment, I think, and I'm confident we'll get there, but we're going to need help, and we're going to need folks like yourself continuing to remind others on the team. And I think I know you have Chief of Staff of the Army, Secretary of the Army, Sergeant Major of the Army. I mean, there's a lot of focus right now on getting people to really self-reflect, back to that, know yourself, know and understand as an individual what kind of biases you may have, whether they're intentional or unintentional, just the way you sort of view the world and interact with people, and maturing and growing beyond those. So I think it's a good question. I would say don't give up, keep trying. But for all of us on the net here today, we all share equal responsibility in making sure that we absolutely are intentional about listening and interacting for the value added portion with all our team members. So thank you. I appreciate the question.
Hey, sir, right now we're about 1 minute past the top of the hour. If you have time for one more question, we'll do that. Otherwise, we'll allow you to close it out, sir.
Yeah, so I'm on y'all's time. I'll stay as long as you'd like to within reason. If folks have other things to do, I absolutely understand that. I don't want somebody walking away feeling like they didn't have a chance to get a question addressed.
Okay, thanks, sir. With that, we'll hand it over to Staff Sergeant Yapsa Arano from 35th Signal Battalion Brigade.
Good morning, sir. It's Staff Sergeant Yap with 51st ESB. I had a quick question about the multimode domain operations. And the question, sir, was as of right now, is it only for specialized units? And is there a timeline for the multimode operations to get down to the lowest level?
Okay. Hey, I appreciate your question, because right now, as I've stepped into my job as Deputy Director of Joint Staff, one of my primary focuses is helping to bring about this concept of joint all-domain command and control, JADC2. Some of you may have heard that. You may have seen an article pop up on the early bird, or you may have never heard of it. At its basics, the idea of joint all-domain operations is really getting after the reality that for the United States to both act in competition and in conflict, to fight and win, that we have to change the way that we are engaging in fighting, that it can't be just, purely land focused. It can't be just air and space focused, that it's got to bring together that collective of cyber, air, land, sea, space, and have truly the ability to communicate at speed of relevance across each of those domains. In terms of, in some cases, it's about getting information from any of our sensors out there, whether it's a F-35 platform, whether maybe it's a Patriot system radar, getting that information ingested. So it's about data, pulling that data in, rapidly assessing it using things like machine learning and artificial intelligence, getting that data back out to the appropriate shooter in some cases, and engaging those targets. In others, it may be about understanding our logistics, how we're theater postured for logistics. And similar to what's going on right now across the United States, trying to manage COVID distributions, they're using AI machine learning to do that. And so I'll get to your specific question, but I just wanted to back into it. At the high level, we're talking joint all domain command and control, working through defining that and showing how it's going to change the way our leaders from all our services fight and absorb information. So it's very data centric. It's about really trying to use AI and machine learning to help us get to a point that we, as a Department of Defense, can absorb information, assess it, act, and reassess, where we are faster than our enemy. So some would call it the old OODA loop. There's some other new terms that we're using out there. So that's multi-domain. That's all the domains out there. Or excuse me, all domain. Multi-domain would be picking 2, 3, maybe even 4 out of those, but not all domains. So maybe let's talk about the Army having a firing battery sitting out on an island somewhere in the East Pacific, communicating with naval assets, and maybe the Army's firing on behalf of the Navy. So that's sea domain, that's land domain. There's probably some deconfliction in the air domain there, but it's more that bilateral. So you're thinking multi-domain versus all domains doing it all at once. And so how do we as an Army have our piece of that? Well, that gets back into what we really talk about as a tactical grid, right? And so when you hear things like the network CFT bringing out capabilities that we were talking about earlier, like meshed radios, some of those types of things, that is the Army's portion that contributes to that multi-domain fight. We also are working to stand up a multi-domain task force right now in the Pacific. There may be some others to start experimenting with those capabilities and really understanding how we're going to bring those into a wide variety of Army units to use in the future. So a long way of saying, at the tactical level, we've got a network CFT, we've got a multi-domain task force that's starting to try to figure that out and show the Army what it's going to look like, and it will probably result in changes to how we structure our forces and organizations to fight. So more to follow. Stay tuned. News at 11.
Thanks so much, sir. I think we have time for one more question, and I will give that question to First Lieutenant Pate.
Good morning, sir. This is First Lieutenant 296 BSB. If you had to name one characteristic, what would it be?
Part of your communication was broken up there. I heard name one characteristic. That's a characteristic for what? For an individual, for a unit, for communications. If you can just help me narrow that down, that would be great.
My apologies.
Hey, Lieutenant Pate, you're coming in a little too broken.
Name only one character.
Can you hear me, sir?
Okay, not very well, but I'm going to answer the question I thought I heard, and if I'm not right, then you can refocus or post it in the chat room maybe, and Major Barrett can help me get it. What I think you were asking is if I could only name one characteristic that maybe is most important to let's say a communications officer NCO, because I don't know how far you're scoping that down. I think that is being trustworthy. I've alluded on it a few times. For any of us, regardless of what level we serve at, what organization we're in, if I can't take you at face value for what you're telling me and you break that trust with me, then we cannot be operationally effective. That degrades our relationship, it degrades the structure of our Army, and it really places unnecessary doubt there, right? Because so when bullets are flying, when time sensitive, when networks are dropping, coming up, when I ask you a question or you ask me something, you expect me to respond truthfully to you, direct to you, and in a non-ambiguous manner so that you can make informed decisions and act in a time-sensitive manner. And like I said, that trust enables freedom of maneuver for you as, let's say you're a subordinate of mine. I'm not going to be micromanaging you. You're going to come to me and say, hey, sir, we had this happen. I couldn't get you on the net, but I went ahead and I decided this for these reasons. And I'm going to say, Hua, I'm glad you took initiative and took action. What you just told me was prudent and made a lot of sense, and that really helped us. Or I'm going to say, hey, Hua, I appreciate you taking the initiative. It sounded like you asked for some inputs there. However, you should have talked to this person, or you should have looked here for some additional information to make a better informed decision. All of us are learning. If you're striving to improve yourself, I think most leaders will recognize that. So trustworthy is my one critical there amongst others. I think if you adhere to Army values, you'll be very successful. Acronym leadership, right? Loyalty, duty, respect, selfless service, honor, integrity, personal courage. Stick to those and you can't go wrong. All right, Major Barrett.
Sir, thanks so much. And on behalf of 7th ID and all the signal leaders that are on the line here from JBLM today, really appreciate your remarks. And I know that I probably speak on behalf of everyone here that we have a lot of things to take away from all the remarks you left us with today. So I'll hand it over to you for closing comments. And in your closing comments, sir, if you could include a website that you frequently visit, a book that you recently read, a podcast that you listen to, or anything you could provide the group as we all develop as professions of this United States Army.
Okay. So again, thanks to everybody who's on. I really appreciate some of our NCOs being represented today. I appreciate y'all asking questions as well. Thanks to all the junior officers and field grade officers that are on also. Hopefully we'll get a few warrants out there. I am always receptive to your questions, thoughts, concerns, comments. Feel free to either send me an email. I'm Charles R. Out there on the global. If you want to join up with me on LinkedIn, I think that's a good forum that you can sort of choose who you follow or what organizations you follow to stay abreast of what's current, what the focus is, whether that's cyber threats, whether that's emerging technology, where our Army's going. You'll see a variety of things, and if you're seeing too much, you can choose what you don't see, right? So I think subscribing to the early bird, which used to be a DoD published thing, now I think it's a commercially published, but it's a highlight, if you haven't seen it, of really all the relevant articles broken down by service, by the Army, by DoD, and then has some comments down below. I have read that literally since I was a lieutenant. You'll never have time to read every article on that, but it's part of my daily battle rhythm. Try to do it earlier in the morning. I'll scan through and I'll pick 3 to 5 articles that look of interest to me. It may have something to do with communications. It may not. It may be talking about the Army or DoD. It may talk about something totally different, but it's related. And that's how I try to grow and inform myself. In terms of reading, over the past summer, I think I've read 6 different books. I think Like War, Pete Singer, I believe, is probably a good book for you to read. Let me make sure I didn't confuse my authors here. I'll try to do a quick check while I got y'all up if I don't drop you here. Any of Pete Singer's more recent books that really get after what the next fight may or may not look like, I think those are helpful reading. Yeah, it's called Like War, The Weaponization of Social Media. That's probably a good book to look at if you haven't watched The documentary, I think it was out on Netflix regarding social media. That's probably a good 1 hour to spend just to keep yourself informed of what's going on out there. And then the final book that was just recommended to me from Major General Yi over at DISA is Burn In, also by Pete Singer. So, whether you get those digitally or you get the hard copy, I usually order a used or a cheap paperback just because I like having something tangible to look at. I think either of those will help you expand your mind and think a little bit about what the future warfare may be moving towards, at least in terms of the character of war. I think everybody would say that the nature of war will remain largely unchanged for a while. Alrighty, thank you all again. I hope you have a great day. Major Barrett and Colonel Geronimo, if y'all don't mind staying on so I can have a final closeout conversation with y'all, that'd be great. All right, go out and do great things. Appreciate it, guys, girls.
Yes, sir. Roger that. Hey, all students, if you could just sign off, and then I'll be opening up a separate chat here in about 10 minutes so that we can begin with our final briefs. And everybody else, if you could just sign off. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
Sir, I want to thank you for your time this morning. I think that was very informative and relevant for the students to hear it from your perspective on what's important to be a SIGO.
Yeah, I appreciate y'all asking me. Let me take a sip here real quick. I apologize. I mean, you know how these things go. It's hard to be scoped enough that you're really hitting what it is the target audience is looking for, but not be so focused that you're excluding others. So I hope that it was a decent balance there. I am 100% committed to adjusting or refocusing. So if y'all do get feedback, good, bad, and different, hey, it would have been better to hear about this or that, whether it's your personal opinion, your students' opinions, please pass that to me, because the last thing I want to do is